Lyra's eyes glowed with curiosity as she stared at the Earth from the window of the Varelian spacecraft. The planet below, so blue and full of life, was vastly different from her home, Virelia. In her world, advanced technology had solved many of the problems that humans still faced. Diseases, hunger, and aging were no longer concerns for the Varelians. They had mastered every aspect of their biology, creating a life where emotions were seen as unnecessary complications. But Earth had something that fascinated Lyra, something that her people couldn't quite grasp: the humans' method of reproduction. For the Varelians, creating life had always been a scientific process, devoid of emotion. Their biology was efficient, and their species had never needed to form the kind of emotional bonds that humans did. But the Earthlings, they had a different way. Humans, as far as Lyra had studied, seemed to view reproduction as something deeply emotional. Love, passion, and connection were all part of the process. That was why Lyra had volunteered to come to Earth. She wasn't interested in just observing from afar. She wanted to understand. She wanted to experience what it was like for a human to go through this process. She wanted to know why humans treated reproduction as something sacred, something beautiful. The spacecraft landed softly on the Earth, and Lyra stepped out. The air was different here. It smelled fresh, with the scent of trees and water mingling in the breeze. Her skin, though adapted for space travel, tingled with the unfamiliar sensation of Earth's atmosphere. Her antennae twitched as they processed the new environment. Everything seemed so alive and so vibrant. She walked towards the research center that was specifically designed for cross-species studies. Here, she would meet Dr. Jacob Richardson, a human scientist who had devoted his career to understanding the biology of other species. Jacob had already studied Varelian biology extensively, and Lyra had studied human biology in great detail. Their collaboration would be key to unraveling the mystery of human reproduction. Lyra arrived at the research center and was greeted by Dr. Richardson. Jacob was a tall man with short dark hair and a friendly smile that immediately put Lyra at ease. His warm, genuine nature contrasted sharply with the cold, analytical approach that she had come to associate with her own people. Jacob was different, and Lyra couldn't help but feel drawn to him. "Welcome, Lyra," Jacob said with a smile. "I'm glad you're here. We have a lot to discuss." Lyra nodded, though her heart fluttered nervously. She had never met a human face-to-face before, and now she would be working closely with one. She had spent her entire life studying humans from a distance. But this was different. This was real. Jacob led Lyra into the laboratory, which was filled with holographic displays and various devices designed for cross-species research. He began by showing her a series of human reproductive processes, using holographic projections to explain each one in detail. Lyra watched intently as the images flashed before her. She could understand the biology, the physical changes that occurred, but what caught her attention the most was the emotional aspect. The images showed couples, both human and alien, forming connections before the act. They held hands, they shared intimate looks, and they whispered words that meant more than just the exchange of scientific information. "Why do humans do this?" Lyra asked, her voice soft with curiosity. "Why is there so much emotion involved?" Jacob paused, clearly considering the question. He looked at her, and for the first time Lyra saw a spark of something more than just scientific interest in his eyes. There was a depth there, something he didn't often show in his work. "It's part of being human," Jacob said slowly. "For humans, reproduction isn't just about creating life. It's about connection. It's about trust, love, and partnership. It's not just the biological process that's important. It's the bond that's formed between the two people involved. The emotions, the care, the trust. Those things matter just as much, if not more." Lyra tilted her head, taking in his words. She couldn't fully grasp it. To her, emotions were something that had no place in reproduction. The Varelian method was clean and efficient. There was no room for personal feelings in the process. "I don't understand," Lyra admitted. "In my world, emotions like love are seen as distractions. They complicate things. They make us weak. But humans, they seem to believe in them." "Why?" Jacob smiled softly. "I think it's because love is what connects us. It makes us human. Without it, we'd be no different than machines, no different than the tools we create. It's love that makes us feel alive." Lyra felt a strange sense of unease mixed with curiosity. The idea that emotions could make someone feel alive was both foreign and intriguing to her. But Jacob's words stirred something deep inside her, something she had never felt before. As they continued their discussion, Lyra began to realize that this wasn't just a scientific experiment for her. There was something more here, something she couldn't put into words. Jacob had a way of speaking, a way of looking at her, that made her feel as though she was more than just a researcher. She felt seen. The next few days were spent in intense study. Jacob explained everything he knew about the human reproduction process, including the emotional, psychological, and physical elements that were involved. Lyra absorbed every detail, her mind racing with questions and thoughts. At the end of the week, Jacob proposed a new idea. "Lyra," he said carefully, "I think it's time for you to experience human reproduction for yourself." Lyra blinked, surprised by the suggestion. "Experience it? How?" Jacob's expression was serious but kind. I think it's time for you to try it. To go through the process, not just study it from a distance. You'll never truly understand it until you experience it firsthand." Lyra's heart began to race. She had thought about the possibility, but the idea of actually going through with it was daunting. It wasn't just biology she had to understand. It was everything that came with it. The emotions, the feelings that humans experienced were not things she could easily control. But there was a part of her that was curious. A part of her that wanted to understand. To see, feel, and experience what humans did. I'm not sure," she admitted. "It's so different from what I've known." Jacob gave her a reassuring smile. "I understand. But you won't be alone. I'll be here to guide you through it. You'll have control. It's about understanding, not just the physical process, but the emotional one too." Lyra hesitated, for a moment, but she could sense that this was a turning point. She had come to Earth for answers, but now she felt as though she was on the verge of discovering something far more profound than she had expected. "I'll do it," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "I want to understand." Jacob nodded, his expression softening. "We'll take it slow. There's no rush." As the days passed, Lyra prepared herself for what lay ahead. She knew that what she was about to do would change her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But the human way of life, the emotions that Jacob had described, were becoming something she couldn't ignore. There was a part of her that wanted to experience it, to see what it felt like to be truly alive in the human sense. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear: her journey on Earth was far from over. It had only just begun. The days following Lyra's agreement to experience human reproduction were filled with nervous anticipation. She had come to Earth with a clear scientific purpose, but now she was embarking on something far more personal. The concept of emotional bonds between humans had intrigued her, but to truly understand it, she had to live it. She had to feel it. Lyra's mind was filled with questions. How would it feel? Could she truly understand what Jacob had described? Could emotions be as powerful as he claimed? The idea that something as simple as a connection between two people could lead to the creation of life seemed so foreign to her. Yet it was a part of what made humans unique. It was something she wanted to understand deeply, something that went beyond her scientific studies. In the days leading up to the experience, Lyra spent long hours in the research center, learning about the intricacies of human relationships. She studied human psychology, focusing on how emotional intimacy played a role in reproduction. She studied the language humans used, how they spoke to one another, the words they chose, and the way they expressed care. Jacob continued to guide her. But as time passed, Lyra noticed a change in him. He no longer spoke to her only as a colleague. He seemed more cautious, more reserved. She had felt the shift too. Her own feelings were growing in complexity. It wasn't just the research now. It was the connection between them, the bond that had slowly begun to form. One afternoon, after a long session of studying human behavior, Lyra asked him, "Jacob, why did you agree to help me? Why did you choose to guide me through this process?" Jacob looked up from his notes, his eyes meeting hers with a calmness that surprised her. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, considering her question. "I believe in understanding," he said slowly. "When I started this research, I didn't want it to be just about facts and biology. I wanted to understand people. I wanted to understand life. And Lyra, you're different from anyone I've ever met. You're open to learning, open to discovering new things. I wanted to help you because I believe it's important to experience life fully, not just study it from a distance." Lyra's antenna twitched as she processed his words. There was something in his tone, something deeper, that made her feel both confused and comforted. She had never experienced emotions like this before, emotions that were so unpredictable, so difficult to understand. But she found herself drawn to him, not just as a colleague, but as something more. She didn't know if it was possible to truly understand human emotions, but she wanted to try. As the days passed, Jacob and Lyra spent more time together outside the laboratory. They took walks through the Earth gardens, exploring the vast landscapes of the planet. During these walks, their conversations shifted from scientific matters to more personal topics. Jacob would tell her about his childhood, about his family, and about the things he loved. Lyra, in turn, shared stories from her home on Virelia, the places she had visited and the things she had seen. Their bond grew stronger, and with each passing day, Lyra's feelings deepened. One evening, as they sat by a small pond near the research center, Jacob looked at her and said, "Lyra, I've been thinking a lot about what you're about to do, and I want you to know that you don't have to go through with it if you don't want to. I'll still be here to help you with your research. There's no pressure." Lyra looked out at the still water, her reflection shimmering on the surface. She felt a sense of peace in that moment, as though the world around her had slowed down, but her heart was racing. The decision she had made was no longer just about science. It had become something personal, something that involved her emotions, her heart. "I don't know what I'm feeling anymore," Lyra confessed. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "When I first came here, I thought I was doing this to understand human biology, but now it feels like it's more than that. I don't know if I'm ready for what this might mean. What if I can't handle it? What if I don't understand?" Jacob reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. His touch was warm and reassuring, and it sent a ripple of something unfamiliar through Lyra's body. It was a simple gesture, but it made her feel safe, as though she was no longer alone in her uncertainty. "You don't have to be ready," Jacob said softly. "No one ever truly knows if they're ready for something like this. But you've taken the first step, and I'll be here to help you. We'll take it slow, and if you need to stop at any point, you can." I'm not going anywhere. Lyra looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw not just a scientist, but someone who cared for her. She wasn't sure what she was feeling, but in that moment, she felt a connection with Jacob that went beyond words. It was deeper than anything she had ever experienced before, and it terrified her. But it also made her want to understand it, to understand what it meant to be human. The following days were filled with more preparation. Lyra's mind raced as she thought about everything Jacob had taught her. The physical process, the emotions, the connection. It was all so overwhelming. She was used to being in control, used to understanding everything she studied. But this was different. There was no textbook that could prepare her for what was about to happen. One night, as she stood by the window of her room, looking out at the stars, Lyra thought about her home on Virelia. She thought about the cold, emotionless approach people had to reproduction, and she realized how disconnected it had made them feel. She had always believed that emotions were a weakness, something that could cloud judgment and lead to mistakes. But now, as she looked at the earth below, she wondered if she had been wrong. Perhaps emotions weren't weaknesses at all. Perhaps they were what made life worth living. Her thoughts were interrupted when Jacob entered the room. He looked at her with a gentle smile, but there was a seriousness in his eyes that made Lyra's heart beat faster. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly. "If you're not ready, we can wait. You don't have to rush." Lyra turned to face him, her mind made up. She didn't know what would happen next or how she would feel afterward, but she knew one thing for certain. She needed to understand, and she needed to experience it for herself. "I'm ready," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "I want to understand." Jacob nodded, his expression softening. "We'll take it one step at a time. And remember, I'm here with you every step of the way." As they stood together in that quiet room, surrounded by the stars of a distant world, Lyra felt both afraid and hopeful. She was about to embark on a journey that would change her forever, a journey that would take her beyond the realm of science and into the heart of what it meant to be human. And she didn't know where that journey would lead, but she was ready to find out. Lyra stood in front of the large mirror, staring at her reflection. Her heart raced as she adjusted her clothes, feeling a mixture of excitement and unease. Today was the day when she would try to experience human reproduction for herself. Her mind was filled with questions, and yet there was something else too, a sense of anticipation that she couldn't explain. Jacob had been kind and patient with her, explaining every detail, every step she would need to take. He had assured her that they would go slowly, that she could stop at any time. But Lyra had made her decision. She wanted to understand. She wanted to feel what humans felt. It was no longer just about science. It was about something deeper, something more personal. She could still hear Jacob's voice in her head, calm and reassuring. "Take your time, Lyra. We'll go through this together." Her mind drifted back to the conversations they had shared in the past weeks, about love, trust, and connection. Jacob had opened up to her in ways that no one had ever done before. He spoke about his own feelings, his experiences, and his struggles. He had even shared the pain of losing someone he loved, showing Lyra the vulnerability that humans carried with them. Lyra had never known vulnerability like that. In her world, emotions were something to be controlled, to be kept in check. Vulnerability was a weakness. But here on Earth with Jacob, it felt different. It felt real. And that was part of the reason why she had agreed to this experiment. To feel what humans felt, to experience the bond that was so important to them. Jacob entered the room, interrupting her thoughts. He smiled gently at her, his eyes full of understanding. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice soft. Lyra nodded, though her stomach fluttered with nerves. She had no idea what to expect, But she knew one thing for sure. This would change her forever. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, though her heart felt anything but. Jacob guided her to a comfortable area in the room, a quiet space that seemed designed for intimacy. He had set up soft lighting with gentle music playing in the background. The atmosphere was calm, peaceful, and soothing. Lyra couldn't help but feel the tension in her body begin to ease, though the uncertainty remained. "Remember," Jacob said, his voice tender, "this is about understanding, not just biology. We're here to learn together. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, we stop." Lyra took a deep breath and nodded. She appreciated Jacob's care and his respect for her boundaries. It gave her the courage she needed to move forward. As they sat together, Jacob spoke softly, explaining again how humans experienced intimacy. "It's not just about the physical act," he said. "It's about how we connect, how we trust each other. It's about showing care for one another, being vulnerable, and sharing a piece of ourselves that we don't share with anyone else." Lyra listened carefully, trying to process everything he was saying. She had learned the biology of reproduction long ago, but this emotional aspect was something new. She wasn't sure if she could fully understand it, but she was determined to try. "Do you understand?" Jacob asked gently. "I think so," Lyra replied, though she still felt a sense of uncertainty. "It's about the connection, the trust, the bond." Jacob smiled. "Exactly. And that's something you'll feel. You'll know it when it happens. It's something you can't plan for. It just happens." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on her breathing. She could feel her pulse quickening, the anticipation building within her. It was both exciting and terrifying, this journey into uncharted territory. But she was here, and she was ready. Jacob reached out, his hand brushing against hers. His touch was gentle, and it sent a ripple of warmth through her body. She felt an unfamiliar sensation, a fluttering in her chest, as though her heart was trying to leap out of her. She wasn't sure if it was nervousness or something else, but it was a feeling that humans seemed to experience all the time. She had read about it, but now she was living it. "It's okay to feel nervous," Jacob said, sensing her unease. "This is new for both of us, but that's what makes it special." Lyra smiled softly, her antennae twitching slightly in response to his words. She had never felt so vulnerable, so open. She was used to being in control, used to understanding everything around her. But now, in this moment, she had no answers. All she had was her willingness to experience something new, something human. Jacob slowly moved closer to her, his movements calm and measured. He didn't rush. He let her take the lead when she was ready. Lyra could feel her own hesitation, but she pushed it aside. She had come here for this experience. She had chosen to try, and now she had to let herself be vulnerable, to trust. As they shared the first intimate touch, Lyra was surprised by the warmth she felt. It was more than just physical warmth. It was a connection, a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. She could feel Jacob's heartbeat, steady and calm as if he was there with her, supporting her every step of the way. The process was slow and deliberate. Jacob was patient, never rushing her, always checking to see if she was comfortable. Lyra's body was unfamiliar with the sensations, but she was learning, feeling, experiencing each moment as it came. The more she allowed herself to relax, the more she understood what Jacob had meant. This wasn't just about the physical act. It was about the bond they were forming, the trust they were sharing. The connection they had was becoming stronger with every passing second. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on the feelings that were flooding her, the emotions, the warmth, the sense of closeness. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. She had never known such an experience, and yet it felt right. She wasn't sure how to describe it, but it was as though she was discovering a part of herself that had been hidden, a part that only humans seemed to understand. Jacob's voice broke through her thoughts. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Lyra nodded, her eyes still closed. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I understand now." Jacob smiled, his expression full of tenderness. "You're doing great." For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of peace, a sense of connection that went beyond anything she had ever known. It wasn't about biology. It wasn't about studying a process. It was about the bond that had formed between them, the trust they had built, and the vulnerability they shared. As the moment passed, Lyra felt a sense of calm settle over her. She had done it. She had taken the first step toward understanding the human experience, and it was more than she had expected. It was more than science. It was real. It was emotional. It was everything Jacob had described, and more. Jacob held her gently, his presence offering reassurance and comfort. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice full of care. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. "I feel connected," she said, her voice quiet but filled with a new understanding. "I understand now. It's about more than just the act. It's about the trust, the bond, the connection." Jacob smiled, his eyes full of warmth and pride. "You did it, Lyra. You really did." As they sat together in the quiet of the room, Lyra knew that she had taken an important step, not just in understanding human biology, but in understanding what it meant to be human. She had learned something that went beyond the mind, something that touched the heart, and she knew that this experience, this bond, would stay with her forever. Lyra sat quietly in the soft light of the room, her mind slowly processing everything she had just experienced. The world outside the small window seemed distant, almost irrelevant in comparison to the emotions that were swirling within her. She could still feel the warmth of Jacob's touch, still hear his reassuring voice in her mind. But now she was alone with her thoughts. And those thoughts were more complicated than she had ever imagined. At first, it had felt like a moment of pure connection, a deep understanding between her and Jacob. But now, as she sat there, it felt like the moment was over, and what was left was a confusing swirl of emotions that she didn't know how to process. The calmness that had settled over her earlier was now replaced with questions. She glanced over at Jacob, who was sitting beside her. He, too, seemed quiet, his expression thoughtful, but there was no sign of discomfort. His presence was calming, and she found herself drawn to the way he held himself. It was clear that he had known what this moment meant. But did she? Did she understand everything that had just happened? Jacob turned to her, sensing her uncertainty. "How are you feeling?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, giving her the space to answer on her own terms. Lyra took a deep breath and looked away, not sure how to find the words. It wasn't that she hadn't experienced pleasure or connection, it was that what she had felt was so different from what she had expected. She had imagined it would be purely physical, as if the act would simply be a way to understand human biology. But it had been so much more than that. The emotions, the closeness. It was something far deeper, something she couldn't fully explain. "I feel strange," Lyra said, her voice hesitant. "It's not like what I thought it would be. It's more complicated." Jacob nodded, his expression understanding. "It's normal," he said. "Intimacy is never just physical, it's emotional too. It's about the connection between two people, the trust, and the vulnerability. It can be overwhelming, especially when it's new." Lyra looked at him, studying his face, trying to understand what he meant. She had never known vulnerability the way humans did. In Virelia, emotions were seen as something to be controlled. They were not supposed to be shared so freely. But here, on Earth, everything felt different. There was an openness, a willingness. To connect that was so foreign to her. And in that openness, she felt something she hadn't expected, a deep sense of warmth, of care. "But what does this mean for us?" Lyra asked, her voice quiet. "You and me? We shared something that humans seem to call love, but I don't know what it means. I don't know what to do with this feeling." Jacob sighed, his gaze softening. He knew this moment wasn't just about understanding human biology. It was about something far more complex, something that neither of them had fully anticipated. "It's not just about the physical act," he said, his voice steady. "It's about what comes after. It's about what we do with the connection we've built. That's where trust and care come in. The emotions you're feeling, they're a part of who you are now. They're real." Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, trying to absorb his words. Real. Was that what this was? Was this connection real? She had never experienced anything like this before, and she couldn't help but wonder if what she felt was genuine or if it was just a product of the moment. She had come to Earth with the intention of understanding human biology, but now she found herself caught up in something far more complicated than she had ever imagined. She opened her eyes and looked at Jacob. "But what if I don't understand it? What if I can't make sense of these feelings?" Jacob reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. His touch was reassuring, and it made Lyra feel safe in a way she hadn't felt before. "You don't have to understand it all right. Now, it takes time. Emotions are like that. They don't always make sense, but they're real. And sometimes the most important part is just being open to them. Not everything needs to be figured out immediately." Lyra nodded slowly, feeling the weight of his words. She wasn't sure if she would ever fully understand what she had just experienced. It was so different from the way she had been raised, so foreign to the way her people viewed relationships. But that didn't mean it was wrong. It was just different. And maybe that was okay. For a while, they sat together in silence, the sound of their breathing filling the space between them. Lyra had always been a creature of logic, someone who valued order and control. But now she realized that some things couldn't be understood through logic alone. Some things had to be felt. The silence was broken when Jacob spoke again, his voice softer than before. "Lyra, I want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone. Whatever you're feeling, we can talk about it. We can figure it out together. You don't have to have all the answers right now." Lyra turned to him, her eyes searching his face. She could see the sincerity in his expression, and it gave her a sense of comfort that she had never experienced before. Maybe she didn't have all the answers. Maybe she never would. But in this moment, she realized that she didn't have to. What mattered was the trust they had built, the bond they had shared, and the fact that they were both willing to be vulnerable with each other. "I don't know what the future holds," Lyra said, her voice quiet but steady, "but I know that I want to learn more. I want to understand what this connection means, even if I don't have all the answers yet." Jacob smiled, his eyes soft with understanding. "That's all anyone can ask for. Just take it one step at a time." Lyra smiled back, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. The questions still lingered in her mind, but for the first time, she didn't feel overwhelmed by them. She felt like she had the space to explore, to learn, and to grow. As they sat together, the bond between them grew stronger. It wasn't just about human biology anymore. It was about something more. It was about trust, care, and the willingness to be open with each other. Lyra didn't know what would come next, but she knew that this was just the beginning of something new. In the days that followed, Lyra spent time reflecting on what she had learned. She continued her studies now with a new perspective. She wasn't just a scientist anymore. She was a person who had experienced something profound. She had shared something with Jacob, something that went beyond the physical and into the emotional. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to truly connect with another being. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Lyra was ready. She had taken the first step into the unknown, and she was no longer afraid of what the future might hold. Whatever came next, she knew that she wasn't alone. She had Jacob, and she had the understanding that emotions, though complicated and unpredictable, were a part of what made life worth living. And that, she realized, was more than enough. The days following Lyra's emotional discovery were filled with moments of reflection and learning. The research center had become both a place of study and a space of quiet contemplation. Lyra had always approached life through the lens of science, facts, and logic. But now, she was faced with emotions that didn't fit neatly into any category. Her understanding of human relationships, love, and intimacy had been shaken and transformed. She found herself thinking about her experience. With Jacob often, his touch, his kindness, and the bond they had shared. It wasn't something she could explain with science. It was something she felt deep inside. It was real, and yet it was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. It made her question the rigid beliefs she had once held about emotions, vulnerability, and connection. Sitting at the research desk, Lyra scrolled through her notes, reading about the human concept of love. The more she studied, the more she understood that what she had experienced wasn't just about reproduction. It was about building trust, opening up to someone, and learning to care for another being in a way that went beyond the physical. Love, she had learned, wasn't something that could be defined by a single moment. It was a process, a journey, one that took time and patience. The thought of the journey unsettled her. She didn't know if she was ready for such a thing. Emotions were complicated, and human relationships were messy. But Jacob's words echoed in her mind. Take it one step at a time. It was something she could understand. The idea of progress, of slowly learning and experiencing, was something that resonated with her. She didn't need to have all the answers now, she just needed to move forward. As she reflected on these ideas, she heard a knock at the door. It was Jacob. "Mind if I come in?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of warmth. "Of course," Lyra said, offering him a small smile. Jacob entered the room and sat down across from her, his eyes studying her with a look of quiet understanding. He knew that their shared experience had left an impression on her, but he also knew that she needed time to process everything. He didn't rush her. Instead, he let her come to him when she was ready. "How are you feeling?" Jacob asked, his tone soft, as if he were asking not just about the experiment, but about everything that had happened since. Lyra paused for a moment, considering his question. "I don't know how to explain it," she said finally, her voice steady. "It's not just the biology, Jacob. It's everything. The connection, the trust. It's something more than I imagined. I never thought I would feel this way, and now I'm not sure how to move forward." Jacob nodded, recognizing the complexity in her words. He had seen her struggle with the concept of vulnerability, and he understood why she might be feeling uncertain now. It's okay to feel confused. Emotions aren't something you can control or predict. But that doesn't mean they're wrong or bad. They're real, and they're a part of us. Lyra took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. She had never been one to share her feelings easily. In Varelia, emotions were often seen as something unnecessary, something that clouded judgment. But now, she couldn't ignore what she was feeling. She had been so focused on understanding the human body and biology that she hadn't realized how much the emotional part of the experience would affect her. "I don't want to make things complicated," she said, her voice quiet. "I'm not sure what I want. I don't know how to move forward." Jacob leaned forward slightly, his gaze compassionate and understanding. Lyra, this isn't about making things complicated. It's about being honest with yourself. You don't have to figure everything out all at once. Just take it one step at a time like we talked about. We'll figure it out together, whatever it is. Lyra looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. She felt a sense of comfort in his words. But still, the uncertainty lingered. How could she navigate emotions she had never allowed herself to experience before? Could she learn to trust, to care for another being in a way that went beyond what she had known? Could she truly understand love the way humans did? The thought was overwhelming, and yet, there was a part of her that wanted to try, a part of her that wanted to experience all the things that humans seem to feel so easily: joy, sorrow, love, connection. It was all so new, so different. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth exploring. I don't know if I can, Lyra admitted, but I want to try. I want to understand. Jacob smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. That's all I ask for. Just being willing to try. You don't have to know everything right now. Lyra felt a sense of relief wash over her, as though a weight had been lifted. Jacob's words gave her permission to take things slowly, to learn at her own pace. She didn't have to have all the answers. She didn't have to be perfect. She just needed to be open to the experience, to the journey of discovery. That was enough. As the days passed, Lyra spent more time reflecting on her emotions. She began to understand that there was no rush. There was no need to force herself to have everything figured out. She could take her time, learn at her own pace, and let things unfold naturally. She still had much to learn about herself, about human emotions, and about relationships. But now, she wasn't afraid to explore those things. One evening, as they walked through the gardens outside the research center, Lyra felt a sense of peace. The quiet hum of the Earth's wildlife filled the air, and the sun was setting in the distance, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple. It was a beautiful moment, one that Lyra had never truly appreciated before. In Varelia, time often moved quickly, and emotions were easily ignored. But here, on Earth, she was learning to slow down, to savor the present moment. She looked over at Jacob, who was walking beside her, and realized that she had begun to care for him in a way that was different from anything she had ever known. It wasn't just about trust or connection, it was about something deeper, something more. It was about understanding that emotions, though complex, were a part of life. They were what made life worth living. I'm starting to understand, Lyra said softly, her voice thoughtful. It's not just about the science. It's about the feelings, the emotions, and the people we care about. Jacob smiled, his expression full of warmth and pride. You're learning, Lyra, and that's all I can ask for. As they continued to walk, Lyra felt a sense of calm settle over her. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She was no longer afraid of the unknown. She was ready to explore, to learn, and to experience life in a way that she had never thought possible. With each passing day, Lyra grew more comfortable with the idea of human emotions. She was learning to embrace them, to understand that they weren't something to fear or control, but something to experience. And with Jacob by her side, she knew that she wasn't alone in this journey. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The future was uncertain, but Lyra no longer felt afraid of it. She was ready for the journey ahead, ready to understand what it meant to truly connect with another person, and that, she realized, was the beginning of a new chapter in her life.